Welcome to another edition of 10 Minutes with Kate. So I'm sporting the Bud Ice shirt today.
What happened to the penguin you were going to put in the background?
It's still in the mail. You know how the mail is here.
Oh, yeah, I mailed you a bunch of books a
I know.
month ago. I think you're still waiting for one
Oh,
box.
no, the second box showed up. I can't believe that your parents spent $60 on postage to send me a box full of books.
Hey, are you upset that you got $60 worth of books?
No.
Actually, because it's a lot more.
Yeah. Oh well, that's how much the post office charged you. But anyway, so are you enjoying the Polar Vortex?
Oh, yeah, so much. I got this awesome thing. It's called the Comfy, and it's a giant sweatshirt that's also a blanket. I hate you.
All right. So speaking of cold, like my segue here, our guest actually comes to us from St. John's in Newfoundland, Canada. He's the host of the Hockey Minds podcast, a very unique take on the hockey perspective. We'll get into it in a moment here. Please welcome Ryan Stacey. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks guys for having me. It's an honor to come on the show, and yeah, definitely coming from St. John's. It's a little bit colder up here today, and when it does warm up, it just turns into wet snow. So, would like to be down south somewhere right about now.
So I mean, you are out on an island, an island, kind of away from I guess the mainland is the way to put it. I'm not Canadian. I don't know what the lingo you use up there is, but do you typically you always see, they show Montreal, they show Toronto, and they show it just looks brutally awful. Do you get that being closer to the ocean, or is it not quite as bad?
Oh, it is worse. It is by far worse. I remember last year we got a storm with 70 centimeters. I mean, that's a pretty treacherous storm for us. But if it snows here, then you get 100 kilometer winds, which are just like treacherous storm weather. So no, if you think Toronto and Montreal get it bad, then yeah, you haven't seen anything until you come out this far out in the ocean.
Yeah, that's pretty brutal. So I'm 3 hours from Mexico. So just to give you an idea, it's pretty nice down here. It's not so nice in the summertime, but that's the price to pay for never having to see snow.
Yeah, definitely. I'd take that any day of the week. I'll be honest with you.
I don't know why I didn't come here sooner. So let's get right into it. Your podcast, the Hockey Minds podcast, or Hockey Minds podcast, I guess is the proper way. You've taken a unique approach to your show, and most people they're targeting stats, they're targeting rosters and teams and transactions and rumors. You go to the bench, you go to the front office, you go to the scouts. Like, tell us, like, where did this concept come from? How did you come up with the idea? Like, what was the inspiration behind it?
Yeah, so to give you kind of a story of what happened, basically when COVID kind of shut down, pretty much everywhere there last year in March or February, kind of got in a situation where, hockey was stopped and everybody kind of had some free time just to, catch up on different things. And for me, I kind of took it as an opportunity to make some calls and see who I could get in contact with, as I knew pretty much the NHL was shut down as well. So I was like, let's see who maybe sitting at home and is willing to take a call. And basically I did some research and started cold calling and cold emailing some NHL general managers and people who, in the past I'm sure I tried to reach out to, but in the middle of a season you have no chance of getting a hold of these people. And I think I was able to talk to about 15 of them, of the 31 general managers. So it was kind of one of those things that blew my mind in how open people were. And started talking to some of my friends about it, and they would say, okay, what did this guy say? What did Brad Treleving say to you when you were talking with Calgary, and Jim Nill, what was he telling you with Dallas? And while I wasn't maybe giving the trade secrets of those conversations, to me it was signaling an opportunity that maybe there's people out there who want to hear these conversations but don't have the means or the connections to get in contact with a general manager or a director of scouting or a lot of people within that quote unquote secret society of hockey operations. And, I've been pretty fortunate that I'm well connected in the industry. I have a lot of friends who can bridge a connection to someone who, a lot of times you just can't talk to on a day-to-day basis. So basically I started having these conversations and figured that other people would want to hear them as well. Started doing some recordings, and my goal with the podcast was maybe get 50 listeners and 2 episodes a month if I was lucky. And 2 episodes a week now. I could be doing 3 or 4 if I wanted to. It's really blown up, and for me, it's just been an awesome learning opportunity as well.
So what would a new listener kind of expect? Like, what's the format?
I'm calling timeout real quick, Kate. So
No.
Yes, I have to ask. Did Stan Bowman pick up the phone when you called him?
No, wasn't able to get in contact with Stan. He's definitely on the bucket list for sure.
I have some beef with him right now, but no, we'll get into that for another time. Sorry, go ahead, Kate.
I forgot my call. No. So what's a new listener going to hear when they tune in?
Yeah, when someone kind of is just starting to listen to the podcast, it really depends on what episode you go into. My goal really is to cover every area. So, for example, we have scouts, assistant coaches, video analysts. I'm working on getting strength and conditioning coaches, equipment managers, all the way down to mental performance coaches. I've had those on as well. But basically, what I kind of do is just facilitate the conversation. I'm in episode 60 now. 61 will come out later this week, and I'm sick and tired of hearing myself talk. So really, I just try to work to let them have the opportunity to tell their story. We start off just learning a little bit about them personally, and then we kind of go through their career path. And then at the end, it's followed up by some reflective questions and just diving into some topics that listeners are able to send in as well. I always leave an opportunity for that. And I mean, the episodes range from 40 minutes, and I had one the other day go 2 hours. So a lot of those conversations, you kind of get inside stories. Guys working with Wayne Gretzky, I know the jerseys there in the background. We've heard some stories about Wayne. Guys like Ilya Brinz-Galov, the Felinos, all these players and definitely some coaches as well and managers throughout the game. So a little bit of everything, and every episode is different, but you can definitely learn a lot each and every episode.
What's the I don't know the best way to put this. What's the craziest, most unique story that you've heard that kind of shocked you when you heard it, as far as like maybe about a person or a situation that you just did not see coming?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some stories that I hear once the recording goes off that I would love to be able to share. But those are between me and the guests that unfortunately for
off
reasons.
The record, yeah.
Yeah, those are definitely off the record, and some of those are quite the stories. But to be honest with you, I think one of them that sticks out to me actually didn't involve a lot of the players. It was more just a personal story of one of our early guests, Jordan Hunter. I believe he might have been episode 4 or 5. And he was telling me a story about when he broke his leg or broke his ankle. I can't remember, shooting on a net. And he lived up on the top floor of an apartment building. And he kind of went into his 15-minute story of him trying to descend this stairs because there was no elevator on a broken leg or a broken ankle. So, you get stories like that. But anytime you can hear about a guy like Dominik Hasek at the Olympics or Ilya Brinz-Galov in the ECHL, I believe is where we talked about him. So, there's so many stories that I don't think there's one that can really stand out for in terms of a player or someone in management. But it seems like every episode you're hearing something that's standing out in terms of a story that you wouldn't expect to hear kind of going into the interview.
And I've said this many times, but I just love when we have a guest on or someone's telling a story and they're just casually name dropping like legends of the game. It's just like we had a guest a while back. And they were in the New Jersey Devils locker room, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I went up to Martin Brodeur and just asked him, hey Marty, maybe not hey Marty, but going up and just casually name dropping him about asking him a question. I'm like, this guy is an all-time great, and you're just like, oh yeah, I went up and asked him a question randomly. Like, how few people get to do that? So it's still really cool every time I hear somebody do that of having that close-up experience.
Definitely. I mean, one of my recent guests, and I don't believe the interview is live yet, but talks about scouting for the Toronto Maple Leafs and working with Brian Burke and Dave Nonis and all these different personalities and in the scouting world. And a lot of times you don't hear about some of the big name people, like, for example, scouts. The casual fan might not hear about them, but being a fan of that craft in that area, it's interesting to hear about some of those people behind the scenes and kind of get the inside scoop on their personality and how they interact on a daily basis.
So what's a piece of advice that you'd give a new podcaster?
I mean, anybody going into the podcast industry, it's just, put yourself out there. Like a lot of people I find starting a podcast may be afraid to put their own spin on things. They're not sure how it's going to be received by the public. So I think it's just be yourself and don't be afraid to reach out in the industry. Like, outside of my first 5 or 6 guests on the podcast, I didn't know any of my guests. And it's more so just shot in the dark, kind of saying, "Hey, I'd love to have you on the podcast," or "I know a friend of a friend who suggested that you'd be someone good to talk to." So at the end of the day, just put yourself out there and meet people, because the podcast industry is great. And I've learned that even more so working with the Hockey Podcast Network and getting to meet some of the people there. And, I've made a lot of friends in a short amount of time just because everybody has an interest in the game.
Yeah, and we have to say, I was going to wait to the end, but I mean, the Hockey Podcast Network, I mean, it's just an awesome collection that was put together very quickly. Like it almost seemed like this thing just grew from a couple of shows to 40 plus shows overnight. It seems like, and they do a tremendous job putting these shows together. And I think even since we've ramped up the 40 plus shows in the last couple of weeks, I think they've added 2 more or 3 more new ones. I'm like, oh, back to work. Got to get those ramped up now too. So it's a great organization. We're really honored and thrilled to be working with them.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun, and everybody there has so many different personalities and very outgoing people. And like you said, it seems like every other day we're adding a new quality show. And for somebody who has a website and is trying to feature all these podcasts and have their links on my website, I feel like every morning I'm waking up, and especially where the guys are out west, I'm going to bed, and those guys are putting in a few hours of work in the evening. And like I said, every morning I'm having to update and add a new show and reach out and meet some new people. But definitely it has been successful as of late, and we're really picking up some steam here, the last couple of months, especially with NHL coming back and more relevant content kind of flooding Twitter and the podcast world.
Awesome. So Ryan, where do we find your show? Where do we find your social media?
Yeah, I tried to put it everywhere. You can pretty much find it on any podcast platform. And if there is a platform that you can find that it's not there, by all means, reach out to me and I'll make sure that that gets changed really quick. But you can find it on Twitter and Instagram at Hockey Minds Pod. And, like I said, any other platform. I also have a website, www.hockeymindspodcast.com. And I try to put as much stuff as I can on there, including the upcoming Hockey Minds conference.
Yes,
and
I almost forgot to ask about that. Yes, sorry, go ahead. No.
Yeah, so I'll just go into the Hockey Minds conference. Pretty much that's my big plan for sharing some more ideas. I find that, as many podcast episodes as I have, there's still a lot that we don't get into. And through the podcast, we kind of go through their stories. But a lot of these people have so many ideas on new things and areas that we don't cover through the conversation. So the date isn't confirmed yet, unfortunately. There's a lot of planning that still needs to happen. And I believe I have about 10 guests lined up, and hopefully we'll have those announced soon. But it's a free virtual event for anybody that wants to join it. You don't have to be in hockey operations. You could just be a fan. And it's going to be a weekend, later in the year, with a lot of information sharing and a lot of inside stories. So I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, it's a little bit of planning yet to go, but it should be a great event with a lot of great people.
Great. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you again for coming on the show. Yeah, I almost made it through the entire show without slipping up. Almost. Maybe one day.
I'm disappointed.
Yeah, but we don't edit anything here. It's just we want to keep it completely authentic. We leave the screw ups, and that's what makes it fun. So, and part of the reason why it never goes 10 minutes too. So, Ryan, thank you again for being on the show. Again, the show's Hockey Minds Podcast on the Hockey Podcast Network. For the two of you, please stay warm. I know I will.
Yeah, I'll try my best. Thanks, guys.
So, signing off today, any words of wisdom, Kate?
Make sure to wear gloves and don't rip your windshield wiper off your car.
I think that's great advice for anybody. I don't. We'll deal with that topic on another time. It's the end of the show. I don't want to get into that. So, all right. So this has been another edition of 10 Minutes With. Check us out at stadiumscene.tv, at Stadium Scene on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, and TikTok. and at stadium_scene on Instagram. And we will see you next time.